Hi everybody, I'm Tim Doty. Thanks for being here tonight. Each year, Humane Society of West Michigan opens its doors to thousands of animals in need of new homes. Tonight, you'll meet two of them, a cat named Eeyore and a dog named Lennon. While they've never met, they share a background of adversity and an ability to not only survive but thrive. First, meet Steve and Teresa Nolan, dedicated volunteers to share Eeyore's story, which began on a cold winter's night.
She was found by a Good Samaritan up on Fruit Ridge, I believe, by a gas station. And like 6 weeks old, maybe she was, with ears bleeding and skinny, scrawny, just a mess.
The ears were still attached. They were just by ligaments or whatever. And they were almost falling off, but they were still there. You can also see the little bit of leathery look there. There is no fur. That'll never come back. We don't know how that happened, but she was not taken care of very well.
She was just a mess when they brought her in, truly.
Tabitha Hugh House saved this cat from being put down. They thought it was frostbite, so they were just going to put her down. And they were walking to her room, and Tabitha took her and said, "These are too straight to be frostbite cuts." So she showed Dr. Swift, and they looked her over and everything. Yep, this has now become a different case. It is not just frostbite, it is
abuse
towards the cat, and everything changed from there.
It was a few weeks later when Steve met Eeyore. It was love at first sight.
And I said, "Oh my gosh, what a beautiful cat." And she goes, "Well, do you notice what's missing?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, she has no ears." So I took her from Karen, and I was holding her, and she's just sitting in my arms, and I turned around and I walked, and Karen goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm adopting this cat." We started the paperwork that night. The next day, we finalized it, and then, but still we didn't have her for almost a month or two.
Easily. Because
she had to go to Michigan State for her lungworm, to have that work done, and to check her rib cage, because we believe she was stepped on when they were holding her down.
While at MSU, Eeyore was diagnosed with toxoplasmosis. Once home, she was facing 6 weeks in isolation.
You know, we were kind of concerned about her socialization because very few people could touch her. We were gowned, we gloves, masks, and certainly the other animals, but I think she does okay as far as socialization now. I mean, we all want that rubbing up against us constantly, but she chooses when and where to go into sunshine.
She is shy, she is fearful, she has to get used to things. It's not easy for her, but she has her days too. So there's some days you cannot touch her enough to pet her and things like that. She'll rub up against the dogs, which is not normal because she's usually chasing the dogs.
And over time, Eeyore became part of their family, and that cold winter's pain was left in the past.
I don't think that she really thinks about what's happened to her or that she has no ears. I don't know if she remembers being in a cage for such a long time. She doesn't live that way. You know, it's just not part of her. And live in the present is what she teaches me. It's just, what's done is done.
I've had people say, "Are you the person who adopted that earless cat?" So years later, people are still remembering her. They're not forgetting, so there's been a true impact to this cat, to this city.
The long-term effects of Eeyore's abuse are fairly evident, but not all wounds are as easy to see.
Some are very visible, but the scars that you can't really see, I think it affects them for quite some time.
And that's where we meet Lennon, one of 150 dogs rescued in a puppy mill raid last May.
I don't know if you remember last spring how horrible the flooding was. So these poor dogs essentially were just completely covered in mud, and just like a dog would look like living outside.
Any puppy mill dog leaving an environment like that, they've never been exposed to new people, new places, new things. They've never been exposed to anything. So coming from an environment where they've always lived in like that and coming here was very difficult. Lennon specifically had the hardest time of all of the dogs that we took.
Really basically no human contact. I mean, they didn't really seem to understand exactly what a person was, didn't understand what treats were just very, very fearful.
A life without human contact, living in isolation, discovering a new world.
I really feel like the emotional was the biggest thing for these dogs.
We had to try to find ways to make them more comfortable and make Lennon more comfortable in this environment. So some of the things we did, he seemed more comfortable underneath his bed. That's primarily where he spent most of the time. So we just made a really nice, comfortable spot for him under there. So he wasn't just laying on the cold floor. He had a spot that he could go and he felt safe.
After a few months, Lennon was ready for a new home, and Colette Begley, looking for a dog for her daughter, called to find out more about him.
And I'm writing down his story and tears are streaming down my face. The number of teeth he had to have extracted, the situation at the puppy mill, the number of dogs that were rescued, how traumatized he was. It was really overwhelming to hear that.
The next day, they met Lennon for the first time.
And when Lindsay brought him in the room, she said, don't look at him. So it's kind of hard to have a relationship with a dog when you can't look at him, but he wandered around and he wouldn't take any treats. He jumped up on Jeff one time. And we went home after that and just couldn't get him out of our minds. And really wondered if we could give him a home. So the next day, my daughter and I went down and Lindsay suggested we become a foster home. So we bundled him up and put him in the car, and I remember as we were leaving the Humane Society looking over at my daughter and seeing how happy she was, and little Lenny poking his head out from under the towel, and I thought, this is a one-way trip, he's never going back again.
Then it was time to make Lennon feel right at home.
When we got Lenny, we had absolutely no expectations that he would ever come out from under the coffee table. And we said that explicitly, that if he lives in his little bed under the coffee table for the rest of his life, that's okay, that we're willing to provide that for him. And each week we see new movement that he has made where he wants to connect with us, where he wants to be in relationship with us.
And to see him move from always having his tail between his legs to then eventually letting the tail up and even wagging the tail was like a huge, change for him.
It was probably 2 months before his tail moved from between his legs to the first time I saw him wag his tail. And my heart literally leapt when I saw it. It was the sweetest thing, and it was only for maybe 2 seconds, but it was so much fun.
These are just two of the hundreds of stories that happen each year. It costs $30 a day to care for each animal at Humane Society of West Michigan, and it's not funded by federal or state money. It exists thanks to the generosity of people like you.
Community support for the Humane Society of West Michigan is so important because dogs like Lenny are not the first to be chosen. He was a traumatized animal who was placed at the Humane Society because they have behaviorists on staff who could address his needs.
I don't know what would have happened to these dogs if they didn't have a place like that to go.
Without this funding, there is no Humane Society. There isn't any. And that's sad for West Michigan, and it's actually sad for our state because we take in animals from other shelters too. We have to have the money. We need the money.
And those kinds of professionals make space for lives like Lenny's that have experienced such abuse and trauma so that they can have maybe a fresh start or at least some education of the families for how to create a forever home for them.
Eeyore and Lennon are not alone. On a daily basis, animals in need come through the doors of Humane Society of West Michigan for a second chance. We know we can't do it alone. That's why events like tonight are so critical for us to continue to provide quality medical and behavioral care for the thousands of animals who count on us. We open our doors and our hearts to alleviating their pain. In so many cases, we set up the Eeyores and the Lennons for success with adopters for their next forever home. Thank you so much for letting us count on you to make sure that animals like Eeyore and Lennon get the second chance that they so richly deserve.